It's the sound of Philadelphia. It's the sound of Philadelphia. It's the sound of Philadelphia.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Philly Blunt. My name's Johnny Goodtimes.
Hey, this is Greg.
And Reef having some technical difficulties, so we're hoping he'll hop in any minute now.
Yeah.
But while we wait, we wanted to get the thing popping. So we're excited to have today with us the founder and owner of Baology on JFK, 18th and JFK. Please welcome Judy Ni. Judy, welcome to the show.
Welcome, Judy.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for coming.
Wanted to kick it off because I know that, in the past year, obviously things in the restaurant business have everybody's been thrown a curveball they couldn't have possibly seen coming. And, when you look back on the past year, what's the first thing that stands out to you over, how you guys made that shift?
I think, honestly, the thing that stands out to me is kind of that you've seen the best and the worst in people. And I think that's been the most illuminating thing that we've seen this entire year. And I think that's it's heartwarming at the same time heartbreaking. And I will say, for the record, the only reason we're here is because we have a phenomenal team, and we're so indebted to them.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk a bit. Let's go back a bit. You started in the corporate world. You were not, you were not aspiring to be a chef when you were young, and it was just sort of something that you stumbled across and seemed to be were smitten with. And even though I know I've read in a couple different places, your mom was real excited about the corporate path, you were kind of enamored with the idea of having a restaurant.
I think timing wise, it kind of worked out nicely. I went to school and had real jobs, I guess, in the mid to late 90s. And it was in New York City. So you were seeing all these great restaurants come up, the big boom during that time period. I think we're still riding it kind of now. And you just saw these great restaurants coming up. And I had grown up with my grandparents who had lived with us, and they were phenomenal, especially my grandmother, just a phenomenal cook. And I didn't realize this, she just preserved all these classic recipes from our culture. And we had nothing really to do. So we would just talk to each other and cook food. So we just made a lot of food together. And it was just something that we bonded over. And then I came out into New York, and I was kind of there's none of the food that I grew up with. And no one looked like me making this food. And it was never a pathway that was something you could consider. It was always you just do this at home. It's not you can't make a real job out of it. And only people who don't have other options go do this thing. And of course, I was a very dutiful daughter, so I followed what I was supposed to do. And I realized, spending way too much money eating out and enjoying it so much that I really wanted to give a voice to our culture and also just do something great.
What town did you grow up in, and where's there Taiwanese restaurants in your town?
So I was born in upstate New York, and then we moved to Kentucky.
Wow.
I'm
going to guess there was no Taiwanese restaurants.
So, what prompted that?
So I'm going to so many interesting things, right? So Corning we moved there first because my dad got his first job out of graduate school there. And then he went to go work for IBM down in Lexington, Kentucky. My mom got her second graduate degree then too. So we were just going down there, and I can't remember if we went out to eat because in general, we just really didn't go out to eat very much when we were growing up. But my kindergarten teacher was Miss Wu, and she was married to a Taiwanese guy. There's actually a huge Taiwanese population in certain parts of Lexington and Louisville, and they're really doing a great job down there representing the culture. So don't be surprised. They actually are down there. And then we moved to northern New Jersey growing up, which definitely had a much larger presence of just broad strokes East Asians. And then there was definitely a community of Taiwanese folks who grew up here as well. So like there's a whole group of us that grew up together enjoying the foods of our moms and like our aunts and our grandmothers. And there was this one particular restaurant that just did a kick-ass job called Hunan Cottage on Route 46 in Fairfield, New Jersey. It is no longer there, but like I remember my mom telling me stories about that location because it was like 10 minutes from our house. And I think 5 different Asian restaurants, for lack of a better way of saying it, went in there, and there was only one woman and her husband who were able to make it work, and it was like phenomenal. People would wait like hours on the weekends for it.
So was that sort of the maybe the starting point was, I mean, of all places, Kentucky?
I mean, listen. Well, I don't know about how I love about Kentucky these days. Their governor seems to be doing a good job with their teachers and vaccination, so I'm proud of that. But I think it's also just the idea that like representation has to come from everywhere. And, you know, it was really, originally I was like that jackass who's like, I only want to do fine dining. I like, it's got to be like $6 million in order to come join. And like, I was fortunate enough to be taken in by a bunch of folks in different restaurants and was able to experience like incredible professionals. And it really changed the way I looked at the industry. And it made me also realize after I spent time with them that there needed to be a different model out there in terms of, you know, you can't just be like a $250 meal if you're going to have the super high quality presentation as well as, you know, food sourcing and production. It needs to be more accessible and more equitable. So Baology came about as an idea coming from that because originally it was supposed to be a fancy schmancy restaurant.
So you were in Philly, I think I read like 5 years before you started your own restaurant? Oh my God, has it been that long already? Yes. We moved down here in 2012. So what was it about Philly that made you want to do it here?
So we had looked at a bunch of places because New York, not to sound like a cliche, but like everyone's from a fancy schmancy restaurant there. My husband and I were fortunate to work for 2 fancy schmancy restaurant people in New York. And it would have just been, not that it would have been too easy, but like, it's not unusual to be Taiwanese and do Taiwanese food in Manhattan or New York. And like, there's a huge community out in Flushing. So it's not really like that obscure. So we looked at different cities, maybe where there wasn't as much representation. And my husband had lived in Philly prior to us meeting, and he really liked the city. It wasn't too far from New York, so I could keep going back. And then you still had access to all the great points, and you knew like the general growing season was about the same. So obviously we could get access to similar ingredients that I had grown up with in Northern New Jersey. So that wasn't going to be a barrier either. So it kind of worked out nicely. We got a job offer for both of us to come down and help a former chef de cuisine of mine from Blue Hill. And it kind of worked out. It gave us an opportunity to do, you know, like a market analysis. Mm-hmm. Excuse my dingus dogs who are starting to act up because, you know, of course.
That's all right. We all have either dogs or kids who always make a ruckus while we're doing this from home, so it's fine.
Yeah. Awesome. I mean, Reef can't get online. The dogs are going crazy. Like we cannot wait to do this in a bar again.
Oh my God.
That's gonna be such a great day when we can hang out in a bar and stand around and do it. But hopefully not too long.
I still here. We got him. I think. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Hold on, let me get his mic on. I think. Dun, dun, dun. Maybe he's muted. Maybe you might be muted on your end, Reef. I unmuted you. It says nothing happens.
So, Judy, I wanted to ask, and I know that it's always, we had even talked a little bit before we went on the air, but wanted to ask, you do Taiwanese food, and I think there's obviously a lot of Chinese food in the United States and in Philadelphia. And I'm curious, what's the big sort of line of demarcation of what Americans would come to expect from Chinese food, from what they would expect from Taiwanese food?
I think just like any other cuisine, you would look at the history and the provenance of the food. So, if you look at Italian food, tomatoes grow in the culture and in the cuisine when it's a warmer climate. If there's more cream and dairy, that's usually northern Italy because of what grew there reasonably. Taiwan's been, I will say this nicely, occupied and visited by many different people. So we have a lot of different various influences. Obviously, China is a huge part of it. The Chinese cuisine in itself has so many nuances. So, we were fortunate and this gets into nerdtastic land, so I apologize. So like in the late 1800s, we were occupied by the Japanese. So they occupied us till about 1945, just to make it easy for people to understand. And like to the point that people of my grandparents all spoke Japanese fluently. So we have so much of that in our food culture as well. And like the language, the culture as well. And then we had a large group of folks come over from China after the Japanese invasion of China, as well as Mao and the communists. And a lot of them fled to the island. So there was a lot of political strife, is a nice way to say it. But they brought over a lot of wonderful chefs who also fled because they were considered part of the cultural elite. So I always like to say, and I probably hear some disagreement, but many of the best Chinese chefs came to Taiwan. And because of that, we were fortunate enough to get some of the best Chinese cuisine of all different provinces and cultural representations in our island. But you also see how it manifests itself throughout the world. Like Peruvians have great Chinese food too, because they fled over there. The Spanish actually have a large amount of it too. So it's basically wherever we migrated. I guess for us, we're just a really fast-paced food culture. For us, I think, if you talk about food cultures like, in Japanese culture, they talk about umami and things like that. For us, I guess our equivalent might be something like kogan, which is mouthfeel, I guess is what it translates to. So our food has to have balance to it. There's also texture to it. So, you'll get one of our guabas, which are those clamshell style buns. And there's always like the protein in there. There's something pickled in there to give it that bright acidity that you want. There's like something crunchy on top of it. There's like a sauce that goes with it because it gives that mouth like creamy texture as well. And then you have the pillowy softness of the buns. Like all of that just does a dance in your mouth, or it hopefully should. And that's one of the things that we really prize too. So like food should be really, really tasty. It should also be really, really like fun as well. So we don't take ourselves as seriously, I think, as some other cultures, but it doesn't mean that our food isn't as complex or varied or nuanced.
So is there like a traditional staple protein in the culture? Is it fish? Is it
we do
pork,
a lot
chicken?
We do a lot of seafood because we're an island. So think about, prior to all this like modern aviation and whatnot, we are like a fisherman's culture. So if you look at the island, the middle part of it is volcanic. So you have basically growing and farming on the exterior parts of the island. So much of it's seafood heavy. And it's so like, we do oysters and everything. So you'll have like oyster omelets, oyster vermicelli, I guess is the translation for a lot of things. And we love seafood. Like I could eat seafood every single day if I could convince my husband to do it with me every single day too.
Like fish, shellfish, everything?
Everything. Like everything. We got these really cool Skull Island prawns the other day, super sustainable from Australia. And we just did it two ways. Like I did ketchup shrimp, and then I did like just lightly like grilled in a cast iron with like this beautiful sauce that my husband made on it. And it was just like heaven in a plate.
Hearing you talk about, hearing you interviewed in a couple different interviews and reading a couple different interviews, it actually brings to mind another Judy, and that is in the Philadelphia food scene, and that's Judy Wicks, founded White Dog Cafe, and has obviously, probably the biggest pioneer of the farm to table renaissance that really started in the 80s and has come back more recently. I'm wondering two things, like, first of all, are you familiar with Judy Wicks and whether or not she's been sort of an inspiration to you? And secondly, where did you get that approach of not just thinking about, okay, I'm going to put this food out here for this price, but where are the chickens grown? Where are the products coming from? How can this whole thing be sustainable?
So I heard of Judy Wicks when I moved to Philadelphia. And then I will honestly say prior to that, the biggest inspiration was my father, because when we were growing up, you couldn't get a lot of the Taiwanese vegetables. I mean, there's so many Asian markets now, but it wasn't readily accessible when we were growing up in the 80s. And he would grow everything in our backyard. So he was doing these like fantastic things like hoop houses and like all this like coverings. And I'm just thinking this is just what normal parents do because that's what my dad does. So everyone else must do it. And then forward a few decades, I wound up working at this wonderful restaurant called Blue Hill at Stone Barns. And it was on the farm property of Stone Barns Center for Food and Agriculture. And it was so weird. I came in and I remember thinking, this just looks like my backyard growing up. And I didn't understand it. And then one day I said to my dad, like as like a snarky kid, I was like, oh, Dad, it's really funny. Like all of these principles that they do the farming on is like Elliot Coleman, 4 Seasons Farming in Maine. And my dad's like, yeah. And then he like pulls out this book from his, like, he's like, that's what I use mine on. So I will confess it came from my father from a long time ago, as well as just the cultural traditions of Taiwanese cuisine. Like for us, it's always about food, right? Food is medicine. So, you know, great example. Like whenever I go back to Taiwan, it's a super long trip because it's a very long flight. And inevitably I always feel like sick one or 2 days into it. And it's because like, I'm just like not used to the time. And like, as I get older, the time, like, it just throws me off. So inevitably my grandmother will say, how do you feel? And I'm like, Grandma, I'm feeling a little bit tired. Da, da, da. And then she's like, okay, then we'll like, what else are you like? How are your poops? Basically, like we always talk about bowel movements because bowel health. And then like based on a series of like questions and the answers, something will be made for me. I'll take a nap and I'll feel restored in like 3 hours, which is amazing. And it's always that we always look like if you're not feeling well, it must have been most likely something you ate. Did you go drinking the night before? Did you like have too much whiskey? Did you have this? And it's like, okay, well, here, you did this. So this is what you need in order to balance that out. And that's always the first resort as well.
Yeah, my wife is she's a cell biologist, but she's deeply into herbal stuff and like Ayurvedic medicine, which is from India. And it's all about digestion. Anything that's going wrong with you, it's about your tongue and your stools. And it's maybe not even what you did the night before, but maybe you've been eating too much garlic for the last 2 months. And they have herbs for that.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
A lot of it's in Chinese medicine. It's like there were a lot of things that like, obviously Western medicine has its place as well, but it's the combination of that old wisdom that sometimes like, hey, like, you know, are you really feeling sick because like there's something wrong with like your gastrointestinal tract, which is absolutely possible. But if you're eating pizza and like giant steaks and no vegetables, you might want to consider adding some greenage and roughage into your diet. Like if you can't poop, are you actually eating fiber? Or if you're not doing that, like Metamucil is not the answer. It's like part of like, you should like consider eating like some roughage.
Yeah. Have you ever been to is it Long Life Pharmacy, I think, over near where the Trocadero used to be on Art Street? Yeah. That's my first venture into like a traditional Chinese pharmacy. And it's like, wow, a total culture shock for someone who's never been through it or been there.
Oh my God. We're going to have to go to Taiwan and we'll just go down. Like there's just places for all of this. And like you get a stash of all of these things. And like we have all these like old school, like, oh, if you're like having like the shits, here you go. Here's like, here's this medicine that you're going to have. And there's just so many different things. And like, it's the same thing as I think most old world cultures. Like we all had like a chicken broth or a chicken soup. Every culture has that, right? So you just take like and make broth out of it and get all the nutrition out of that. And it's also like my parents came from a very poor country at the time and they didn't waste anything. And I think that was passed down to me as well. And now Taiwan's super prosperous and it's just done. It's like beyond first world country now. And it would be great for people to see that because I think for us as a country here in America, sometimes we don't necessarily have the opportunity to travel outside of our own country and see like what else is possible in other places. And they've done a phenomenal job, especially during the pandemic.
The whole farm to table, it's so amazing. It took so long to get here. And Judy Wicks is like the innovator of it here. When you watch any food show from like Europe or other cultures, it's always what's grown like right in their backyard or the guy down the street. It's just amazing. It took so long to get here.
I mean, it was here. We just lost it. Like we lost it through like a series of like, you know, innovations from the supermarket. We lost it through industrial health. We've lost it through like a variety of like inadvertent or maybe intentional actions by a series of groups of people in decision-making powers. And I think now that we know better as a culture, we should do better. Like we should take responsibility for our own personal health. And, you know, hopefully some like companies like ours can help people with that. But the important thing is to start asking questions. You know, there are so many great farmers in this area that are doing amazing work. Like maybe you had really gross vegetables growing up because I've heard horror stories and I've experienced some terrible food. I'm like, dude, if I ate it that way, I would never touch this ever again. But I was fortunate. Like I just had family members and a mom and a dad and like aunts and uncles who all knew how to cook. And now like I cook okay. And my husband's a phenomenal cook.
Well, I want to know, like, you know, the stuff that you guys specifically make at your place. what's the sort of inspiration there? Like where are you? Are we talking about things that are like new Taiwanese? Are we talking about things that are grandmom's recipes, or is it some combination of the two things?
It's always a combination of the two because it's that's a better representation of the Taiwanese culture. I always like to explain to people because depending on where you are, like if you're a Taiwanese kid and you've been to Taiwan and you know how fast paced that culture is. And we cannot possibly as Americans understand the level of obsession that Taiwanese folks have with food. Like I always say, imagine like a 24-hour news network and the first 10 minutes are about food. That's Taiwan. Like everyone, there's like a cooking show like 24 hours a day and like not like the Food Network. It's just on regular news. It's very odd and very different than the way it is here. And like they talk about like health and how you balance the energies of the food. And it's just part of our natural discussion. So like the guabaos, which I think most people are familiar with, they call them bao buns, which is, I'm going to let everyone know, don't call them bao buns because bao just means bun or it means to wrap something. So when you say bao buns, you're just saying bun buns twice. It's like saying chai tea. It's like gua in Chinese.
Wait, chai tea is not chai. Does chai just mean tea? Oh my gosh.
So for example, like ta is how we call it. And so that word from like Chinese culture has passed over throughout the country. So it's kind of funny how language just like people migrates as well. So that's just something to keep in mind. But like gua means cut, right? So it's a cut bun. And so the super classic version of it is like a red braised, thick piece of like pork belly with pickled mustard greens, cilantro, and peanut powder. So as much as I love pork belly, I think it's a little too rich for too many people to eat it that way. So we take it and kind of modernized it. But conversely, there are like guabao shops in Taiwan that do like 25 to 30 options and like, which are phenomenal. So I guess it's a reflection of modern Taiwanese cuisine because they're just having fun. It's like a taco. You just put stuff in it. It's like, who doesn't like bread with stuff in it? And then things like the Xinzu rice noodles are an homage to my family's hometown. So we're from a town called Xinzu, which is, if you're in Taipei, which is like the northern tip of the island, we're like an hour southwest by driving. And it's known as the Windy City, not for the same reason, not the politicians, but because it's actually on the coast. And so the legend is that the winds produce a certain type of rice noodles, so we're famous for that. And then, I mean, pot stickers, guotie is like pretty classic. And then renbings are my favorite thing probably on the menu because they're an homage to the most famous place for them in Taiwan, which is 2 blocks from my grandmother's house. So it's just a wrap with really great sauteed vegetables, a little bit of hoisin sauce, and like you choose your filling in it with peanut powder. And when I get back to our hometown, like I usually am fortunate enough that someone grabs me a whole like plate of stuff, and that's just a bunch of like, and that's always in there. And like that family has been making that being since my mom was a kid.
Is Taiwanese cuisine vegetarian friendly?
Very vegetarian friendly. Most of the population is actually Buddhist. And until probably a few months ago, my grandmother was actually Buddhist vegan. So Buddhist vegan includes no hot peppers, no alliums, so no garlic, no chives, no scallions, because they leave residual pleasure in your mouth. And yep. And 10 to 15% of the population is actually Buddhist vegan. So you can go back there and like, we're a really big family. Like on each, I think, what is it, 36 or 38 first cousins. So when we go back, it's like usually a big group of people and like inevitably more than one person is definitely Buddhist vegan. So, but my grandmother on my mom's side, she was, and like when we would go out, like it's always like we would rent out the rooms because we have so many of us and you have to call ahead, but you order like the Buddhist vegan meal. And it's like, she'll order for like 8 people, let's say. And we're always like into it. We're just like sitting there devouring all of it because they don't look at it as vegan. They just look at it as like, we just need to make food delicious. This is what we're doing with it.
Right.
So it's pretty awesome. Like you can eat really, 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 really well there of like any diet.
Yeah. What's behind that? Like you said that it's a food crazy area. Like what was there any sort of, I know you said earlier, like there's all these different cultures that have contributed to the food being so unique, but what do you attribute to the culture being so food centric?
I think it's that we had a hunger and a desire to grow, you know, and when my parents were growing up in the 50s and 60s, Taiwan was still a developing nation and there wasn't much outside exposure. We had been occupied by the Japanese, the nationalists have come over from China, and like, you know, you were seeing in the 70s and 80s, you know, industry was starting to burgeon. So then you're like, oh, everything's opening up. There's TV, there's like all of this access to the outside world, like bring it on. So everyone just started doing that. And like, we're not purists about food. Like, I'm not sitting here to be like, well, you can only have this if it's only done like this. But it is like, there's a basic level of respect for the ingredients and the quality. And I think that's underlying the culture as a whole. So, you know, there's so many different ways to express love for people. We're not an affectionate group of people. Like, we don't do the whole, like, I love you, I think I'm so proud of you. Like, I remember this like couple came in, a slightly older couple, probably closer to my parents' age. And they came in and they were Taiwanese and they're like, oh, we're so happy for you. This is so, and like, I'm translating. They're like, this is so good. And I'm like, you have been out of Taiwan way too long, because no one in Taiwan would ever tell you it's so good. They would say, 不错, which is not bad, which is not to say, and they said, this is 很好, which is very good. And I'm like, no. And so there's like, small things like that.
So
why is that, do you think?
Well, she probably feels right at home in Philly then. Like that,
yeah, right.
That's like, that
yeah, how's your food? It's all right.
Such a lateral move. Like, I know when I like work, if I do like a good, like I host Quizzo, if I host a good quiz, I know that like Greg and the other folks from Philly will be like, yeah, that wasn't the worst quiz you've done. Like, then I'm like, oh my God, that's the highest praise there is.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's because we're entirely very grateful as a country for what we've been given, right? We know we're like this teeny tiny island of like 23 million people. We worked very hard as a group to get what we got. There was a huge investment in resources and the people, because, you know, a lot of people just looked at us as like, you know, they're just people, they're island people. What can they do? And through the innovation and investment of their own people, they did this like amazing thing. Like, I would highly encourage anyone who wants to go travel, once we actually can safely travel, to go there, understand what it's like to be welcomed by a people that maybe don't look like you or maybe aren't from the same culture, but they're just so happy that there's an interest in their culture. Like, I took one of my best friends, Jenny, with me back to Taiwan. And she's this like beautiful blonde Cajun girl. And she's just like, this is amazing. And we were going to Dihuajie, which is like an old, the port where the Japanese used to bring in their imports. And my grandmother used to go there all the time to buy fabrics. And so my aunt was taking us over there. She's like, oh, I only remember how it looks. I don't exactly remember all the streets. And it had changed a lot since the last time she was there. And like this young kid comes over and he's like, oh, I see that you guys are struggling. Would you like, is there something I can help you with? Just randomly. Like, just imagine a random guy coming up to you and be like, hi, you look like you need help. Can I help you? And you like, don't fear him at all. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Like, there's no suspicion. He's not trying to hawk you for money or anything. And we say, yeah, we're looking for Dihuajie. Do you mind helping us out? And he's like, oh, just go down to that like traffic light and you're going to go 2 more blocks to your right. And we were like, awesome, thank you so much. So we're starting to walk. He walks away. And then like 2 minutes later, he's like, you know what? I just want to make sure you guys get there okay. So let me walk and escort you over there. And he did.
Nice.
And it was just like, it's like, this kid's like clearly like probably, I don't know how old hipsters are, but he's like a young hip kid who like, I wouldn't think anything of like trying to come over and help, but he was just so kind. And that is generally the perception that most people have for our little island. Like, we're very grateful when people want to spend time and share food, share culture with us. We don't take it for granted. And I think, you know, one of the things you saw with Taiwan and its, I guess, COVID response was, you know, there was a lot of information they learned from SARS the first time it happened. So they were able to effectively use it for this time around. So not that any death isn't important, but out of 23 million, only 9 people have passed, and most of them have been from outside sources coming in. So they've taken care of the country very well. And there's this great hashtag, like hashtag Taiwan can help. We don't say we're the best. We don't say we did a great job. We just say, let us help.
Right.
And that's very Taiwanese.
When I was when I lived away at college, there was a guy from Taiwan on our floor, and we were really like just curious about the culture, and he was so happy. Like, his whole thing was to invite like 6 of us to his place to cook.
Yes.
To cook a meal for us, a traditional meal. So I totally get what you're saying.
Always happy. We always welcome people to come over, have some food, like share meals. Like there's nothing better than that. And it's the way of sharing love with each other.
And so, you express that, I think, more than just through the restaurant, but you've also really, I think, especially in the past year, have gotten involved with some various charity endeavors. You guys have, you and your husband have cooked quite a bit for folks. Can you talk a little bit about how that part of the business is so important to you? Like, it's obvious that is, the restaurant is one thing, and then there's just this attachment to it that's just helping people in Philadelphia.
Yeah, let me see if I can figure it out. Because I was reading about today. Is Hospitality Together?
Yeah, we started a nonprofit that kind of highlighted the two different worlds of education and hospitality and put them together, which is incredibly important because I think as a bunch of misfits who kind of come into an industry and like we're all trying to figure it out, like it's a great group of people. Like this industry is full of the most amazing people, so generous, so giving. And I think we were trying to figure out how do we welcome people into this industry, but also make sure they're provided the resources and education that they need to kind of go anywhere they want to, because hospitality represents that. It's the opportunity to go anywhere, become anything, because it touches everything. Food touches everyone and every culture and everything. So why wouldn't you want to provide people with fundamental support? And we have the flexibility in our industry to be able to do that. And we also do educate through so many other soft skills that I think are increasingly becoming important because we're seeing the devaluation of, I guess, human labor, for lack of a better way of saying it, in our culture. And really what it is, your technical knowledge can be very strong, but can you listen to someone? Can you learn? Can you grow? Those are very different skill sets. And I know there are plenty of people that I've grown up with who are like amazing. Like all the kids went to famous schools and like all these fancy schmancy places. And I'm in my 40s now. And I just realized like, y'all just stopped growing. Like you didn't learn, you didn't get better. Like you were like, you had it too easy because you went to the really famous school ahead of time. And then you just thought, well, I'm done. I don't have to do anything else. But life is about ongoing change, ongoing growth, always getting better. And I think that's always true for like Taiwanese culture. Like I always used to say, my parents would always say like, oh, how come you didn't do better on your test? And I realized, and this is the way I kind of like organize it in my head, like the messaging meant well, the marketing was terrible. So they're always saying basically, you have infinite possibilities. You can always do better. It was just delivered in a not effective manner, let's just say. So if we can see that in ourselves, how great is that? Because everyone starts at different points in life. But what we can do is offer each other growth opportunities and growth education through different ways, whether it's formal, informal. And I think programs like Hospitality Together kind of combine that. And back to what you were saying, Johnny, about the community, like we live in this world, like you cannot not see it. And I think, at least for me, and I can't speak to most other people's experiences, like it's really sad. Like if we imagine ourselves as a collective, and we are, whether or not we want to see it that way, we are only as strong as the weakest link in our communities. So wouldn't you want your team to be strong? And fundamentally, food is one of the basics that we can provide to people. I can't provide shelter, not very handy with other things, but we can make food. And I will also say it's not just me and my husband. It is absolutely the commitment of our team and people who in this community who have given us this opportunity. And we are incredibly appreciative of that because our responsibilities to each other as a culture and a community is to serve one another, to care for one another. And I want the next generation to be stronger. So, for anyone who has kids, I would want to invest so that their friends and their communities are stronger so they will be better. Like everyone's played on a sports team where you knew there was a person better than you. You were always better because that person was better. So why wouldn't you want everyone to be better? And then collectively, we all rise up together. I mean, I know this sounds like floofy, but it's also an economic recovery thing. Like you don't feed people, they have no fuel, their brains can't think. Who do you think is going to innovate and create the next like Amazon, the next Microsoft, the next eBay, the next GoPuff? Let's make it Philly based. So we need to think about it that way. We need to think it as an investment in the next generation so that we all have work, we all have jobs, and we all have something to do with all this time that we have apparently on our hands.
Yeah,
sure.
You've obviously never seen me and Johnny play basketball because there was no one better on our teams. If you ask us, you were clearly the best.
I saw that intimidating picture on your Facebook page, Greg.
So I want to get into like Hospitality Together. I mean, So just so people understand, who are listening, understands what it does. You take students who have an interest in hospitality, you do some interviews with them. Once you find out that you think they're good for the program, I think you put them through like 2 or 3 weeks, soft skill training. Then you find them an entry-level job. You give them advisors. You give them free online classes or access to free online classes. You're giving them trans passes so they can get to their jobs, right? It's not just like an opportunity to come have a job. It's a full, like you're helping them all throughout all aspects of their life.
I mean, it's a full ecosystem, right? How many people, like, I think a lot of the time we don't even realize how many people have surrounded us to lift us, to give us the opportunities that we have. I think about you guys who were kind enough to reach out to me and say, hey, would you love to be on this podcast? How fortunate am I that you guys thought of me, right? Like, that doesn't just happen. And I think we just take these things for granted. And because we've been given other opportunities, or we've seen the model of this happen somewhere else. So it's a collective effort. You need education because it's an important way to get your mind to organize itself. But again, just being able to read a book isn't enough. It is not definitely enough anymore. And then a lot of the time people think, oh, well, it's so easy. Like, I remember there was a kid who had a job and like it was snowing one day and the owner had called and they were really upset that the kid was late. And I'm like, well, they're like, why don't they just take an Uber? I'm like, okay, do you know how far this kid lives from you? And also, like, they were complaining that the kid showed up half an hour late. I'm like, they showed up. Did anyone else show up in your team?
Right.
But for some reason, they were singling out this particular kid. And I'm just sitting there thinking, like, we need to make, like, people do want to work. They want to educate themselves. They want to grow. But are we doing everything enough as, like, employers, as, like, educators, as a community to teach them, right? Like, a lot of this stuff comes from education, and we don't think that this is formal education, but teaching someone how to, like, even beyond just knowing that, like, writing a resume, how do you know that you need to write a resume? Who taught you that? Like, where did you learn that from?
Yep.
Right.
It's based on who's around you.
Yeah, I know, and I know that's something that I've got a friend in IT that has been, you know, I've had a pretty tight circle over the last year just of people I come in contact with, you know, like in the same room basically. And one of the few is a buddy of mine that's in IT, and he has really pounded into my head, and when we get together, the idea of systems. And I know that, you know, you're a big fan of that too. And I think that ties into what we're talking about, because a couple of times, you know, because Greg and I have both coached in South Philly, and a couple of times I would you know, I would connect somebody I knew in the restaurant business with one of the young men I used to coach. And then, like, they might go 1 or 2 times and then not go back. Well, a big part of the problem in hindsight was that I didn't set up that system, right? Like, they just showed up. It was probably the biggest culture shock of their life. I might as well send them to the moon and said, okay, now, you know, go and walk out there. So, you know, I think that, you know, in terms of what you're saying, like, that's been my big eye-opening thing of the last year. And the thing I've tried to put into my head is, don't just try to help, you know, take one person from point A to point B. It's try to create systems so that the person kind of gets themselves there with a lot of help. And I feel like that's a lot of what, you know, you already got that memo a long time ago. I just got it, but I would be curious to kind of hear your thoughts on that overall, just in terms of systems.
So I'm the product of 2 hard science parents. So my dad's like a chemical engineer. My mom has like a food science and computer science background. So I know they're also both immigrants. So they didn't come to this country thinking that they knew how everything operated. They learned the systems. So one of the things I think is an advantage inadvertently for kids who are like first gen born here like me is that you kind of have to figure it out, because you realize, oh, your parents definitely don't understand everything about it. But conversely, they also have invested to understand, like, okay, so these are the laws. This is the tax code. These are the things. They don't assume it's going to be like in their country that they came from. And I think because of the way that my parents looked at the world, obviously that passed on to me. So, like, I grew up with, like, my dad's bookcase of, like, you know, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And, you know, people are like, oh, you're like so young to know that book series. And I'm like, But I mean, I would read anything there was. My father taught me to read the stock pages when I was younger, which instilled in me like a love of numbers. And these are all the things that they passed on to me. And you don't realize until you get older. And honestly, when you meet people who are not necessarily from the same bubble of the world that you grew up in, like most of the kids I know, super phenomenally well educated. I'm like super average in my group. And we just all assumed that we all spoke the same language because we did. Because our parents came from like super highly educated backgrounds. And then you realize when you move into different industries like hospitality, there's a whole new system you got to learn. But I think we don't do a good job explaining systems to people. And then we don't create very good systems, by the way. And then we also are then like so indignant, like, how the fuck did you not know this? And then we treat them like shit for not knowing it.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's an education too. And we need to do a better job of like this is my personal thought, so hopefully it doesn't offend everyone on the planet. I think we intentionally make things really complicated sometimes so we can feel really smart.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
And I have a friend, Alexis, who's phenomenal. I remember her explaining to me, she works for a really well-known company, which I will not mention right now because I'll probably get in trouble if I bleep them in. She said to me, she was a teacher when she was at her first career. And then she got her MBA and she went to go apply to this very prestigious consulting company. And they were fairly dismissive of her. She's like a young woman. And they're like, why do you think you can actually work at this company? Just like poo-pooing her. And she's looked at them directly and she said, because I can make really complicated concepts and explain them very clearly to you and make them understandable. And I was like, that's what a teacher does. And we need more people who can actually teach things. And then so we can educate people so they have full opportunity and access to the opportunities around them. But we don't do that. We sit there and we like pontificate about like, I can't believe like you don't have any of these skill sets that I want from you. But have we really given them an education that allows them to do that? Have we given kids the food they need so they can actually have energy in their bodies so they can process things in their mind? We haven't. So I guess a very Taiwanese way of saying things is like, if I make a mistake or I criticize someone for a mistake, my mom would say to me, are you really that much better?
Oh, wow.
Which is really hard to hear, right? But if you turn it around and you say, okay, let me turn that lens on myself, then it's like, okay, well, I have every opportunity that most people didn't have, and I still can't figure it out. Why would I expect someone with far less privilege than me to be able to understand this? And isn't the responsibility of someone who has privilege to share that with other people? Because in a sense, and I'm not religious, but isn't that the world's way of, or universe's way of investing in you as you serving as a conduit to pass on knowledge and wisdom to other people as well? It's a responsibility we have.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. I had a boss one time who said, when you point a finger, there's four pointing at you. So I've always tried to kind of, I've always kind of kept that one whenever I get a little too self-righteous, which is quite often, as Greg will tell you. But
I don't know what you're talking about. Never happened.
All right. Well, let's take it to the blunt. And here's how it's going to work, Judy. We are going to fire some rapid fire questions at you, and you're going to give us some rapid fire answers. All right. Other than Taiwanese, what is your favorite style of food?
I would probably say Japanese food, and specifically more on the spectrum of omakases, like kaiseki.
First concert.
Oh, Lord. I'm going to... Maybe Dave Matthews Band, which is so embarrassing. My husband's gonna.
I know. Oh man! All right, it's been nice having you, Judy. Thanks for joining the blunt.
I mean, that's how basic I am. My first concert with my husband was a Madball concert, an acoustic front, agnostic front. So there we go.
Big difference between acoustic front and agnostic front.
Sorry, it was at the truck.
Love the truck.
Yeah, I know. Can we all chip in and can we buy that?
Buy the truck.
Yeah. I'm so ready for a GoFundMe to get that place back up and running.
What's it supposed to be? I thought it was condos or something.
Oh, I hope not.
I don't know what's happening. It's an interesting story, but it's I don't know. I mean, hopefully not. I mean, if that would be a tragedy of the highest order, but whatever it is, it's going to take millions to just rehab the place. Basically, it's just super old. It's just really old and had a lot of people in it.
Yeah, but investments should be made in things that are worth it.
Absolutely. What is on your bucket list?
Oh God, I really don't. I feel very fortunate that I have pretty much everything. So it's hard for me to like go out of my skin. I would love to go to Hawaii. I haven't been there yet. I visited the tropical island of Taiwan, but never been to Hawaii.
All right, I'll tell you all about it. I used to live there. So
where in Hawaii?
Big Island.
Is that Oahu? No, it's not.
No. Oahu is the one that Honolulu's on. Big Island is the one Kailua Kona and Hilo.
I apologize.
Yeah, no, it's all right. So yeah,
so
when you're ready to go.
Yeah, exactly.
I know, that's what my dad says. But yeah.
Okay.
But ended up coming
Speaking
back.
of like Hawaiian beaches, who's got better beaches, North Jersey or South Jersey?
Okay, I'm going to confess, I can't go in either of the beaches, even though I grew up in both of them. My husband and I, when we first started dating, and he loves the sun, and he's like super, super white, and he burns like crazy. I tan. He's like, you don't want to go to the beach because you're not fun. And I was like, no, I'm actually fun. I'm just allergic to the Jersey Shore. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, and we've had so many fights about this. So one day we actually drove out to the shore. I'm like, I'm going to go in for 10 minutes, just stand in the water and come out. And in 10 minutes, you will see me molt like lobster. And I did. I have my skin is like, I have allergic reactions to chemicals. So, so like, it makes me like break out. And like, I literally become a human walking rash. But like, for example, like, I'm fine in the Outer Banks. So everyone from Jersey is like going to throw things at me.
Yes,
I grew up in Jersey. I love Jersey. Everyone.
No offense to our sponsor, the Wildwoods.
Sorry, I mean it's beautiful. I don't have to go to the water. I can stay on the beach. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, no, that's hilarious because I'm a total beach snob because I lived in Hawaii for a while. I grew up near the Chesapeake Bay, so I don't typically go to the Jersey Shore just because I consider myself a beach elitist. And
you can't.
I can't be seen at a beach like that when I was lucky enough to
go to Big Island too. And once you go there, like going to the Jersey Shore, I'd rather go to Penn's Landing. It's basically the same thing.
Yeah, I'm not going to be, hanging out at Hapuna and then being seen, at Atlantic City, like on the beach. Like, it's just, I gotta be, it's like when you eat at the 4-star restaurant, like that's where you eat now.
Well, I would say go to Taiwan. The black sand is pretty awesome.
Okay, nice. Who's up? Oh, I guess it's back to me, huh?
Yeah.
What is your at-bat music? If you're playing in the major leagues and you were coming up to bat, what would pump you up?
Probably in like something from Hamilton right now because I'm feeling very inspirational for things, and I'm not giving away my shot.
Okay. Nice.
Much better. I was hoping she didn't go Dave Matthews Band. So.
No, I learned. See, listen, I am proof positive that everyone has the ability to grow and learn.
Yeah. Been to a lot of baseball games. I've never heard Dave Matthews played by anybody at a baseball game.
Oh my God. Cotton Eye Joe at Yankee Stadium is hilarious, by the
way. What's your favorite fast food or chain pizza item?
Pizza or like chain pizza?
You go chain pizza or fast food. So Domino's, Pizza Hut, or fast food. What's your item?
So I think this is a very Asian kid thing, but I love the filet of fish at McDonald's because fish is brain food for us. So that was like the only thing our parents would let us get that from there. So I love filet of fish. Like that's soft. Like if that bun is done correctly, it's super soft. And like that tartar sauce, it's beautiful.
All right.
And the fish is sustainable. They changed that. And so they were
really?
Yes. One of the great things, and I can't believe I'm saying this, one of the great things about McDonald's is when they decide to make a move, they're so big that they can change a market like that. So they have been very good actually about sustainability, believe it or not, in seafood.
Wow, that is surprising. Where are you getting takeout?
Where do I go? My go-tos are Sophia's place at El Mercury. I go to Jen's place at Crunchkin. I get my goodies from Sojourn Philly's Cafe Inez, and then pizza from Wood Street Pizza and Dean and his team. And they are great to their people, and I'm happy that their food is just as delicious as how well they take care of their people, so I can give them my money and be completely happy with that.
Nice. I think Greg might have frozen up on us there. So let's see. What is your karaoke song?
So I'm a terrible karaoke singer, so I'm also very shy about things, but pretty much anything.
You do not strike me as being very shy about things.
I'm good. I very much understand my limitations on things. Like, I know I'm good at some things. I'm not like, I grew up I was in a choir, and like, there were people who are now professional singers. Like, it's good to know when you're not great at things, when you meet people who are phenomenal at things. It keeps you humble. It keeps you learning about things. It's pretty great. But I would say anything pretty much like Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, or like Britney Spears, because they're fun and you can be really drunk doing it.
Yeah. There you go. I mean, that's, I'm hard on myself in certain things, and I get mad at myself for not being good at certain things. But karaoke is the one thing where I think I give myself the allowance to be bad.
I mean, that's okay. The point, right?
Right. Yeah, that's kind of the brilliance of the art form.
So we can add that to the list of things that you should do in Taiwan, because Taiwan literally has 24-hour karaoke.
Oh, really?
With tons of booze if you want it to.
Oh man, that sounds great. You're basically a one-person walking billboard for Visit Taiwan.
I mean, it's kind of like you can get around easily. It's very reliable. You can Google Maps. There's cheap Wi-Fi. The food is very accessible and affordable. The fruit's the best thing on the planet that you're going to taste in your life. And it's like, the only issue is that you have to take like a 20-hour flight. But I would tell you after that, it's completely worth it. Like, okay, that's it. It's easy to sell something when you believe in it. And I'm incredibly upset that I can't be there right now. My mom's there right now.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Well, why don't you, before we close, let us know what your socials are. How do we get a hold of you? When are you guys open? Everything else.
So our shop is open Tuesday through Saturdays to the public from 12 to 8 p.m. Just a heads up, our doors are still locked to the public. We do takeout and delivery only with a contactless delivery. We haven't deviated from that since March 14th. So just something to keep in mind. Hi, Greg. Welcome back.
Outrageous. What's going on?
I think it was just my comments about Britney Spears, Backstreet Boys, and NSYNC that probably horrified you.
Oh, I missed that.
Karaoke choices. And also that Taiwan has 24-hour karaoke where you can get drunk really well. And we have our full menu online, so you can take a look at it. And then we're open pretty much 7 days a week, even though because we're doing community work and whatnot. If you want to take a look at our website, it's www.baology.com, BAOLOGY.com. All of our tags from a social media perspective are the same too. It's BAOLOGY. I'm just going to leave mine off because no one needs to see my personal account, and we'll just kind of leave it at that.
I mean, why wouldn't you give it out to the Philly Blunt crowd? I'm sure it'll be fine. No one will bother you.
I don't care. It's like, I think because I'm older, I look at social media differently than I think kids. I'm very careful about what I put on it. And also just like, the things that I care about are basically food and food systems. So like, if you are interested in that, sure, follow me. My personal Instagram account is at Hey, Hey Joodles, JOODLES. So Hey Joodles.
All right. Nice. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Judy. We appreciate you coming on with us. This was great.
Thanks for making the time. You know what? We all do better when we work together. So I hope everyone can spend a little bit of their time or their money to help support other people in this community. That's the only way we're going to survive this, and we'll come out better and stronger together.
Absolutely.
Perfect ending.
Yep. Appreciate you.
Yeah. Take it easy.
Yep.